All right, so now we're going to work on a different type of assemblies. This is going to be top down. The last time we talked about assemblies, we talked about bottom up assemblies. So when we made the device, we already had all the parts made or modeled, and we created our assembly file and then we added the parts to it. Here, this is slightly different. So we have our C clamp frame or our base, and we're going to be adding two parts to this: the screw, and then also the screw head. So these parts have not been made yet; they haven't been modeled yet, but we're going to be adding them into the assembly. So what we'll do is we'll first create the assembly file, and then we'll model the components in the file. This allows us to basically design as we go. So we don't have to have everything solidified or our value set in stone. We can just design as we are modeling. So we want to have our C-clamp frame open, that file open. We want to have this in a folder because we're going to be creating an assembly. So make sure that we have this in a folder that we can save some other files to. We're going to start with an assembly file. I'm going to show you a different way to start the assembly file though. So here we have our frame. So if we come to assemblies, we can go to new parent assembly. And what that does is this is going to create an assembly file for us. And it's actually going to add the C-clamp base, the C-clamp frame to the assembly. Now notice it just says assembly 1. We don't have a name for it yet. If we go ahead and just save, right, this is where it's going to allow us to name our file. So we're going to name our file, make sure that we're saving it to the same folder that our C-clamp base is in. I'm just naming mine C-clamp assembly. You can name it whatever you want to. So we'll go ahead and just say OK. So now we have our assembly file, our C-clamp assembly file, and the clamp base is a child of that parent file. So we have that same structure going. Let's go and work on the screw. So the screw is what's going to allow the C-clamp to actually function as a clamp. So we are going to go ahead and create this model. We have some values here. Okay, so we have some dimensions that are being shown, but not everything. So the one thing that is notably missing is the total length here. So we know that the length of this, we know the length of this area, but we don't know the total length. We're going to essentially establish that total length in the assembly itself. So back in NX, we're going to create a new file, but we're not going to go to File, New, right? What we're going to do is we're just going to come up here to New Component. So with device, we went to Add Component because our component was already made. We already had it, but we don't even have a file for this yet. So we could go to File, New, and then add that component to this list, but let's do it in a different way. So if we go to New Component, all right, it's going to ask us for some information here. I'm just right off the bat, I'm just going to go ahead and say OK. So I'll take the defaults that are on that new component window, and you'll notice on your assembly navigator. So now you have another part that is a part of our assembly file. We have another child essentially. So we have the clamp base, and we have model 1. Model 1 is the component that we just added. Just like with the assembly file where it kind of we just had assembly 1, right? And we had to actually go to save it. Same thing here, but before I go to save, I want to make model 1 my work part. So I'm going to double click on model 1. It is bolded. Also the clamp base is grayed out. So now I will go to save this file, and it's going to ask me to actually to name this. I'm just going to name this clamp screw. And so now we have our clamp screw. And with the clamp screw still our work part, I'm going to go to Home, and now I'm going to design this clamp screw in the assembly file. So we're looking at the assembly so we can see the components that make up the assembly, but I still have all of my tools and everything that we're used to in our part files. So clamp screw is my work part. Go to home and I'll start a new sketch. Now, because the thing that we really need to design around is the length of the screw. All right, I'm going to design this sort of in position. Now, we could technically model this way off over here. So you might be thinking that, well, we have to do it in the way that it's going to be assembled. We don't. So all we're doing is just designing. All we're doing is just creating the 3D geometry. We are not adding any constraints yet. So once we're done here, what we'll do is we'll go back to, like once we have the screw modeled, we'll go back to make our C-clamp assembly our work part. And then we can go to our assembly constraints and constrain it however we want, right? When we model this 3D geometry for this screw, it is free floating in the absolute coordinate system of the C-clamp assembly until we constrain it. So it doesn't really matter where we start this sketch or where we model our part, but since we are keeping in mind that, well, I have part of this screw designed, or maybe I've got it sketched out, but the thing that I don't know is like the total length of the screw. So I'm going to keep that in mind when I select like where I'm sketching. So for me, I'm going to sketch in the right plane, and I am going to change the horizontal reference here so that it's so I can sketch in this orientation here. So I'm just going to choose the Z-axis as my horizontal reference. So I can say okay, and now I'm sketching that in this orientation. If you didn't do that and you're still looking at it like this, that's totally fine too. Nothing's different here. This is just how I prefer it. So we'll model our screw with the dimensions that we know. Okay, so we'll model what we know, and then we will see how we actually finish this up. All right, so we have the basic shape roughed out. Now again, this is going to be the screw, so it's technically going to go through this hole here. Clearly that's not the case. I've got it right here because even though the screw is going to be positioned here, right, the length, what we care about, is still going to be decided in this view right here. Like the length of the screw is the same in this orientation as it is going to be in the orientation of how it's actually going to be used. So this is fine. So now we can go ahead and start adding our dimensions to this and getting this to the point of where we need to start making some design decisions in our assembly itself. Okay, so there is one thing missing from this other than the length, and that is this radius for the pin that's going to hold on hold the screw head onto the screw. We'll do that here in a second. I do want to go ahead and get the length down, and then we'll address that. So here's our part, and And again, the length is what we really care about. So this part is not fully defined yet. It's not fully defined because I can still move this lengthwise, okay? And also it's not positioned anywhere according to or in reference to anything that's set in stone. So our origin, any of our axes, this part is still just kind of floating in space. So we can just kind of click and drag here and kind of reference. So this is going to be the end. Now there's going to be a little bit of length added on by the head. So I don't have to take this all the way, right? I don't have to do something like that. I just have to get it kind of close. So I'll get it kind of close, right? And then I'll come to the other side. And so, there's going to be threads all along here up to a certain point. The whole thing isn't going to be threaded. So I don't want this to be, right up close to this, like right there. But at the same time, I also don't want it to be obnoxiously too long. So I'm just kind of think about, how long this part needs to be. Somewhere along there is probably fine. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and pretend like I'm adding in a dimension, right? So what's populating for me from just clicking and dragging is the length that we established here was 5.692. And that's a weird dimension. That's a weird distance. So I don't want to keep that, but I do want to have a dimension that is reasonable, right? So I look at this and I say, well, that's pretty close to 5/8, right? The 0.692, it's really close to 0.625. So what I can do is I can say, well, instead of that weird number, I can say 5.625. And I can have that set in stone. Now yours might be closer to 5.5. Like this is where parts are going to be slightly different based off of just how you imagine this part. Maybe you think that it needs to be a little bit longer. Maybe you're at more like the 6-inch. That is up to your design. Okay, so we have the length set in stone, but notice that we still have 8 movable curves. That's because right now this part can still move, right? Can still move around. And I'm not changing anything about the size. I'm just changing the location. And really for us, we don't really care about where this is located at. So I'm just going to essentially put in a distance between our vertical axis and the end of our part here. So I'll just say from our vertical axis to this line in the back, and I'll have a dimension pop up. And for this right here, again, I don't care where this is at. So I'm just going to take this dimension as to what it is, and I'll just let it be. That's just fully defined, but we're not quite done with it yet. So remember I mentioned we have the part here for the pin to actually connect the two parts together. So let's look at that. So all that is, we have a radius of 0.031. That's for our 1/16 of an inch diameter, or our hole for the 1/16 inch diameter pin that we're going to be placing in. So over here on this side, we'll go and we'll just make a circle, and just somewhere on our line here, we'll go ahead and just make a circle. This is going to be a diameter of 0.06. 0.0625. And we'll go ahead and locate this. So for us, we'll go ahead and just pick up the arc center from the edge here, and we'll just say 0.0 or 0.1. And we'll trim off the excess. And we're told that we have some movable curves here. And if we click and drag to see what's going on, what it looks like is that our arc center is not aligned with the line, so we want this to be at the center. So we'll make sure that we have our create persistent relations turned on. And I'm going to do a make horizontal for our midpoint to one of the points on either of these lines. So I want the arc center here to be aligned with this line here. So the center of that aligned, it is 0.1 from the edge. And we can go ahead and finish this sketch. And we're going to revolve this. So we're going to do revolve. Select our curve. And the vector is just going to be the center line there. And I'll say OK. So it should look something like this. Now we are going to add the external threads onto the screw. So to add the external threads or internal threads, the detailed threads, we come over here to more. So next to pattern feature and mirror feature, we have more. And you'll see thread. So in detailed feature, you'll see thread. We'll go ahead and click on that. Now we haven't added this to our holes that we've done, our threaded holes that we've done, because most of the time, whenever we're doing like a drawing, it doesn't really matter. So the symbolic threads are totally fine. But let's say that we wanted to take the C-clamp and do like a rendering of it, right? We do want to see the threads. So we're going to go ahead and add this just to the screw, okay? So I went to thread. Notice at the top we have detailed. Okay, so symbolic is what we're typically used to. So it just symbolizes, there's threads there. Detailed is actually going to process the threads. What it wants us to select is the cylinder. So when it'll select the cylinder diameter, and then it'll look at where the start is at. This can be changed if it's not correct, or if you have it starting somewhere else, like you have a chamfer or something like that. You can have it start at the end of the part, not at the end of the chamfer. But when we select the cylinder diameter, it's going to automatically populate this information, and so that's why we did a 1/2 inch for our shaft diameter, because we're using a 1/2 inch 13 TPI threads. For our internal threads here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the shaft diameter here. And I've got this weird, it's just clearly not right, okay? So I'm getting some errors going on. Let's mess with the limits here. So instead of short of full, which I have here, I'm going to go to value. And we really don't want, for this right here, we really don't want this to go all the way down to the end. Okay, that's not what this is designed for. So all that we really need is for the threads to allow us to fully tighten this part. And I'm shortened it up to 4.5. And this looks good for me. So just like how we were kind of designing around the length, here we're designing around where the length of the threads are going to be. So we don't want some weird dimension like 4.64239, whatever. We want something that's makes sense. So 4.5 makes sense. I can say okay. And there is our detailed threads. All right, so the screw is designed, but it is not positioned in the assembly correctly. So we need to actually assemble this into the clamp. So we'll go back to our assembly navigator, and we'll need to make the C-clamp assembly our work part. So we'll double click on that. And now we can see both components. Now, so if I move this, right, it's going to allow me to move it, because right now I'm in the assembly file, right? And if I go back to the clamp screw and then go back to this sketch, right, I'm seeing this sketch. Now, whenever we made this sketch, it was up here, but it's been moved. So this coordinate system has been moved in the absolute coordinate system of our assembly file. So let's constrain this correctly. So we'll make sure that the assembly file is our work file. We'll go to assemblies, assembly constraints. And this is going to be, this screw is essentially going to be threaded through this hole here. So I'm going to go to a infer center axis, and I want to make sure that the center axis of our screw is going to go through the center axis of the threaded hole there. And now when I go to, if I go to move this, right, it'll allow for this movement. All right, so there's the screw. Let's look at the other part that we're going to make. This is the screw head. So this is going to go on to the end here, and essentially we're going to have a pin that goes through and locks this into place. So there's the hole for the pin. Now in this one, we're still missing some information, and really the only information that we're missing is where this hole is located at. And so we're going to essentially design this in our assembly with the same methods. Slightly different though, and I'm going to show you what we're going to do slightly differently. So here's our assembly file. We're going to go to new component. Make sure that our assembly file is our work part. We'll say OK. We have another model 1. We'll double click on that. We'll save it. And this is going to be our screw head. Make sure we're saving it to the same folder as the rest of our parts. So here's our screw head. Now, we do have the option to just go into Sketch and create our part in here. But we really, for this part here, since the only thing that we need is where the actual hole is going to be, none of the other geometry is really based off of what we don't know. So everything else is what we know already. And so one thing that we can do is we can sort of combine both methods of the assembly, so the top down and the bottom up. So you don't have to just stick to one and that's the only one that you can do. This is just two different tools that you can use to design. Sometimes it can be kind of messy to create a sketch in the assembly. And so what we can do is we can actually right click on our the screw head file, and I can say open in window. And what that does is it opens up our file to its own window. So this is sort of like if we just created the file separately and then added it in to our assembly later. So let's go ahead and sketch this out, and we will add the dimensions that we know, and then we'll see what we do next in the assembly. So here is our sketch, fully defined. We'll finish this, and we're going to revolve it around this center axis here. And we do have a hole, 3/8 chamfered on both sides. So we'll go to our hole tool. We'll do a simple drill size. We can just do a 3/8. And we do want to start and end chamfer, and we'll just pick up the center of one of our arcs. is going to be a through body. We'll say okay. And so now if we go back to our assembly file, there is our screw head. Notice everything else is grayed out, so this means that this is our work part. We do want to come back in and make the assembly our work part. And we're going to go ahead and just move this. I'll move the screw as well. I'll back it out a little bit. And we'll position this how it's going to be positioned on our part. So we'll go to our assemblies, assembly constraints. So we'll do an infer center axis. I'll pick up the center axis of this part, and I'll pick up the shaft. I'll say apply. And so we don't really know. So this is here's a design decision that we have to make, is how far does this go onto the part? I'm going to do a distance constraint from the edge of our part here to essentially the end of this smaller area. So I'm going to click on this face, right? And so now we can put in a distance. So this is almost an inch. That's way too far. What if we say 0.1, 100 thou? See what that looks like. That's still a bit far. Let's say 50 thou. Getting closer. I'm thinking maybe 20 thou, maybe even 10 thou. 10 thou. Yeah, I think 10 thou might do us. Maybe a little bit close, but we're not making any contact. So let's call that 10 thou. We'll say okay. And now if I do a section view here to kind of see what we're doing, there's going to be a pin here. So we have half of our where our pin is going to be, but we need a hole in this part here. And obviously we don't have that. We don't even know where it's going to be at. So we're going to pick up that hole location. In order to do that, so we're going to use our wave geometry linker. So wave geometry linker. Before I can do that though, I want to see that sketch. So I want to see the sketch that we have for the screw. So I'm going to right click on the clamp screw. I'm going to go to reference set, and I want to add in the entire part. So I want to see the sketch, right? So here's that sketch. I want to be able to see that and access that geometry there. So there is what we're going to be picking up. So now that we can actually see the sketch, I'm going to go back in to make the clamp screw head my work part. So that's going to be my work part. Double click on that. And so now I can actually like add geometry to this and it be in the part. And so while I'm in the part, while I'm in the clamp screw head, that is my work part. I'm going to go to wave geometry linker. And this is how we can, link components. We can link faces, curves, all sorts of stuff between parts. So this is not just like in one part, but different sketches, like how we change our scope. This is literally picking up a curve from a different component. And that's what we want to do. We want to pick up the curve. So I'm going to do composite curve. Now, if we go down to settings, a couple things. So we do want to have associative turned on. So we can have it to where the wave geometry linker updates. So let's say that the position of our radius changed on our screw. So we had it I believe 100 thou from the edge. Let's say we moved it further down, right? If we have it associative, we're going to see that change on the screw head as well. We can also have it be fixed, so we can make it unassociative so that it doesn't update. We can also do fix at current timestamp. So we have some settings here. We're not going to mess with those. We do want to make sure that associative is turned on, but we're not going to change any of those other than just making sure that's turned on. We do want to pick up, so we want to pick up the curve. So that actual radius, I can't see it though, right? It's actually like hidden from me. Really, the clamp screw head is blocking it. That's what's really going on. So I'm going to go to the Assembly Navigator, and I'm just going to uncheck the box right there. That's essentially displaying or hiding our part. And I'm going to hide it because what I want to pick up is this radius. So I'm going to select that curve, okay? And I'll just say okay. So what that's done is it has picked up that curve and it has imported it in its current position to our screw head. I can turn that back on and we can't really see much, right? But if I go back to the file, we'll see there is our linked composite curve. And if I go to the part navigator, there is our linked composite curve. And it's linking to the location of the composite curve of the screw. And we want to have a hole here for our pin to go through. So we'll go to our hole tool. We're going to use a 1/16 inch drill for this. So we're going to select our 1/16 drill bit. We do not want to start chamfer or an end chamfer. And I can just pick up the center of that arc. I can just pick up the arc center. And it's saying it's unable to find face of target body for direction. That's because it doesn't, essentially saying it doesn't know which direction the hole is going to be going in. That's because we have normal to face selected. So I'm gonna select a long vector. Okay, and I'm gonna select the vector that's going across. Right, we want a through body. And I'm going to say show results to see if we're going through the entire part. So we can say okay. Now we have the hole for our pin. Now let's see how it lines up in the assembly. So come back over here, make the Assembly Navigator our part. And that is where our pin is going to go. So that is the top-down assembly method. So we're basically just designing as we go. You don't have to have 100% designing as you go. You can have some parts figured out, but maybe you're not 100% on the size or the length, things like that. Bottom up is where we have everything assembled and we're just bringing all of our components together. Top down is where we're sort of designing as we go. So make sure you have everything saved and submitted to the Dropbox on Canvas.